of mind is very, very important. And before I throw open for questions, just one other observation about how temperament sets in early. Epilepsy, especially temporal lobe epilepsy, is associated with certain characterological features. And the triad of hypergraphia, hyper-religiosity, and hyposexuality is one such feature that's often talked about, that people with temporal lobe epilepsy appear to have more of these things. And it's interesting that the 17-year-old boy with epilepsy, and I can confirm that he actually has complex partial seizures that come from the temporal lobe, has hyper-religiosity so early in his life as a temperament. And I think it tells you, in some ways, it's a latent lesson about how the brain works, which I'm sure Dr. Chris French will talk a lot more about to us and a lot more eloquently in due course. I'd like to open for any questions about these first two sets of presentations, and anything you'd like to say. Please say who you are and please be brief, whether it's a question or a comment or something you'd like to share. We have the microphones available and it's open, the floor is open.
Dr. Janani Shankar, pediatrician from Child's Trust Hospital. I was very impressed with your entire presentation. We do have difficult epilepsy and coupled with autism and ADHD. We always try to send them off. We don't like to keep them. Try to refer them to some nearest person who will do their best for him. My only question is, what is the entire cost of this package, what you're doing? Is it individualized to each patient, or is it a package? Because we would like to refer a few of our patients. We just want to know whether they can afford this.
Sure. First, to say that treatment is always customized. So we do have standard programs for problems that are predominantly physical, predominantly behavioral, both physical and behavioral. But it depends on whether we are doing a week program, a 2-week program, a 3-week program, and so on. But I'm also very pleased to say today that we are inaugurating this new concept of Sambboati, where we actually have, for those who can't afford, we actually have a model where they make a contribution, a donor makes a contribution through our foundation, and the company discounts the rest. And therefore, we'd like to make the treatments obviously more accessible to a much wider audience. So, doctor, let me assure you that you can send the patient to us with confidence. We'll find the way. I think that's the way to go. Yes,
I'm
doctor.
Saras Bhaskar, counseling psychologist. Excellent that you have a one-stop shop in managing the needs of your clients. Do you have nutrition and diet consultants? Because I didn't see that in your presentation.
We have a naturopathy physician who advises a naturopathic diet. But what would be ideal, I think, would be a nutritionist. Presently, we don't have one. We had one before. But then we have a nutritionist who will be joining us. So I think a nutrition is very important, because there are certain diets, though the diet fads are there, but certainly I think it's underestimated the importance of the diet. So I think across ages, we need a nutritionist to tell us what we can eat and what are the food exchanges and what we can indulge in once in a while. I think especially for children, it's extremely important, and that is missing. There is a vacuum there. So.
My name is Hema, and I am the mother of a kid who has been identified as ADHD. And one of my concerns is, how does the rest of the society deal with, you gave us an exposition about the origin or the sources, but how does the larger society deal with such children? What are the do's and don'ts for the parents, for the school, and for peer group, if you can enlighten us on that?
Thank you. I think that's a really important question. It's something that strikes a lot of people when they have to live with a disorder. I think the first thing, obviously, is most of us feel very helpless when in a social context we are faced with a child who's hyperactive or behaving, shall I say, inappropriately. And I think education of society, not just the families, is extremely important. But as we meet families with disorders, we find that even the family is not educated. So I think educating families and educating society is really important. Raising awareness is really important. And to some extent, unfortunately, awareness is raised in a kind of skewed way. There are disorder groups that are particularly active, which ensure that the awareness gets across. There are other, ADHD, for example, in that way is not well endowed. It doesn't have a disorder group that is very active, that is making sure that people come to know that there is a problem. The second thing that we always suggest is that we must work to keep these children in mainstream schools, because there is no problem with intelligence, there's no problem with grasping. The problem is a lack of attention. The problem is a lack of being able to, contain oneself in the school environment and behave in the way that one is expected to behave. So there are two things that one needs to do. One is that we call it statementing. Statementing in the UK is a process where you put down a statement of the child's needs. And that statement is put down between the treating team, like ours, the concerned child and family, and the school. And everybody agrees that these are the child's needs, and this is how these needs should be optimally dealt with. What happens if you don't do that, unfortunately, is that the child gets excluded from mainstream schooling, and the child is asked to, driven away from one school after the other, down the sliding scale, until finally they land up in a special school, which is quite inappropriate for them very often, because they are quite intelligent and can actually cope with mainstream schooling. So we definitely recommend that you be transparent to the school, talk to them, get them involved, and of course pick a school that's understanding. Not all schools. Some schools are obsessed with in scoring. Now, I mean, we get impossible marks. There's somebody who scored 1,200 out of 1,200. I was shocked. I nearly fell off my chair. But that happens today. So therefore, there is this obsession with marks, and there is this feeling that if you don't score, you can't exist here. So such schools are probably not ideal, but schools which are open, and there are schools, mercifully Chennai is endowed with good schools that are willing to work with families, and very strongly recommend being transparent with the school and work with the school, and pick the right school also if your child is hyperactive. Yes, I see two more hands go.
What my suggestion is, follow up. See, once the treatment schedule is over, it is worthwhile to keep a record, and how they fare, say, after 5 years, a follow-up. Now, that would be something that is very important. Because how does it help them in future? They may come here for a treatment schedule and then go back to their old state. So a continuous monitoring of their condition at every stage would be, after the treatment is over, would be worthwhile.
Yes.
There's always a challenge, and something long is definitely challenging, but we do get back to the patients, and we tell them that they're due for a review or a follow-up. So we have a step-down program after the intensive treatment is over. So like I said, the intensive one lasts between 2 weeks and 3 weeks. After that, they keep coming to us during the weekends, because children go to school. Some of them attend regular school or the special schools. So they are in touch with us during the weekends. So they do Saturdays with the team. So the monitoring does happen unless they move out to a different state. And still they come back during holidays. So it is possible, and I think it's the right way to go. Thank you, sir.
To share a little information for ma'am who just finished. There is a movement in Chennai where when the child has gone through the special schools and they feel he can go in for inclusive education with certain schools who accept them. There is a program where the special schools group, they interact with the mainstream, and they prep up the peer group in the class, the teacher, the parents, and everybody is involved in that. So just for your information.
Thank you. We'll take a last question.
I work with Madras Dyslexia Association, and it's been fascinating to hear about your multidisciplinary therapy, because we talk about multisensory methods of teaching, and I think your services will definitely augment our efforts, because we've been seeing children with a lot of these difficulties, and sometimes we have nowhere to go maybe we found somewhere where we can send our children with these problems and work together as a team and help them. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's exactly what we are looking to do. We'd like to work with people, work with organizations, and we'd like to give many more people the opportunity to try out something that is interdisciplinary, something that stimulates many senses in the true sense. And just to share a little anecdote, how it started was because when we were just doing physiotherapy and counseling in our clinics, we had people telling us, doctor, can I try Ayurveda? Can I go and try this natural type of treatment? And so on. And I think that when we listen to physicians from other disciplines, it really opens your mind about what the way they think about a case, which is very different from the way you think about a case as an allopathic physician. And of course, it also opens your mind about how much wisdom there is in other traditional systems of medicine. For example, the emphasis on what we eat is such an important emphasis, say, in Ayurveda. And today we have treatments for autism and epilepsy like the ketogenic diet, which tells you what to eat, and what you eat alone can get you better. Some children with epilepsy and autism can get better just by changing what they eat and eating a certain kind of diet. So in a sense, therefore, opening one's mind out to what wisdom is available, I think is extremely important. And I think that we see what we are doing right now as that, just opening our minds out. We are learning as we go along. I think we've reached a point after 2,500 patients and 3 years of work. We've reached a point where I think we know quite a lot about what we can do, what we should not do, how we should do it. But that doesn't mean we stop learning. I think that's something that learning is a continuous process. And I'm happy to say also that we now are, as Professor Ramaswamy said, doing two things. We document everything that we do very, very well, pre and post therapy and follow-up. We also encourage people to remain on follow-up, because that in India is the biggest challenge, that people shop, they try something and then they get better, and then if something comes back, they think what you did didn't work and they'll disappear. Then they won't come back. And I think that is the biggest challenge, keeping people allied with institutions. But that's something that we are working on. I think we've timed ourselves quite nicely for...
Can I raise one question, please?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Last one.
My name is Padma Srinath, and I've worked with early childhood for several years now. And schools, essentially primary schools, are really catchment areas where every child does come in, okay? And several times our teachers are so stressed that it's very easy for them now, using newspaper items, to use terms like dyslexia or ADHD or whatever, and scare the wits out of parents, putting in enough stress, enough cortisol in everyone around. My humble suggestion is that the team that you have, I think, is marvelous, and I think I've had the benefit of having them in schools, etc. But I think it would be wonderful if you would make it, I mean, I wish I can dictate a policy and make it mandatory for every school to have their teachers listen to you.
I think we should appeal for you to be the next education minister.
Thank you.
So with that, we come to the end of this session. High tea will be served. May I request the senior citizens to remain seated, and I request the TriMed team to ensure that all our senior citizens get their food where they are sitting. Obviously everyone else, please join us. I do apologize for the small hall. We didn't, until 2 days ago, know that we're going to have such a large turnout, and by the time the bigger hall was gone. So apologies. The next time we'll count on all of you coming and make sure that we actually have a larger hall to start with. Please join us for high tea. Thank you.
A very good afternoon to all of you.
We are delighted to welcome you to this important and auspicious occasion, the first Neurokrish Lecture and the launch of Growing Brains Lab, our learning, aptitude and behavior vertical, as well as Sambboati, our unique collaborative Seva project. We believe that we are today making a very special beginning to what we hope and pray will be an enduring program that benefits several thousand disabled and disadvantaged people in society. May I request Dr. A.S. Krishnamurthy to escort our dignitaries to the dais. Mr. P. Murari, Advisor, FICCI. Dr. Chris French, who will deliver the Neurokrish Lecture 2013. May we request all of you to rise for the invocation.
Gajananam bhutaganadhisevitam kapithajambuphalasarabhakshitam umasutam shokavinashakaranam namami vigneshwara padapankajam mushikavahanamodakahasta चामरकर्णविलम्बितसूत्र वामनरूपमहेश्वरपुत्र विघ्नविनायकपादनमस्ते.
Ladies and gentlemen, kindly take your seats. May we request Dr. A.S. Krishnamurthy, Founder Director of Neurokrish and TriMed, to welcome the gathering. And I would kindly request ladies and gentlemen, to please put your mobile phones on the silent mode. Thank you.
Mr. Murari, our president of the function today, Dr. Chris French, distinguished neurologist from Australia, all the way here for the past few days. Many friends in the audience, our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to stand here in front of you today to welcome you to this program and for us to all share both this launch of a new program, Growing Brains Lab, launch of our Seva project, Sambboati, and of course to listen to Professor Chris French deliver the lecture on how does the brain work, which I'm sure is the topic that we all are very keen to hear about today. Someone said to me, is it going to be very general? I said, I'm sure you can get very specific. So I'm sure you'll hear a bit of generality and specificity going forward. We are a young organization. We have Neurokrish, which is a neuropsychiatry, comprehensive care, multidisciplinary vertical, which works on new models of care. We have TriMed, which is an integrative therapy model of care, which is now working out of 3 centers in Chennai, Tenampet, Thirumanmayur, and Annanagar, and which will open its Velacheri Center tomorrow. And we have now brought this together for this group of children with developmental disability. As you know, developmental disability starts very young. It includes conditions like cerebral palsy, mental retardation, autistic spectrum disorder, attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, and a wide range of minor problems, learning, aptitude, and behavior problems that children face when they are in school. And what we've developed is an integrated therapy model for these children. Having done that, we also felt that it is very important to make this accessible to as wide an audience as possible. because we are a country of the haves and the have-nots. And we wanted to be sure that we did make it accessible at least to a proportion of people who would be the have-nots. And Sambboati is a means-tested model of shared cost, where the company discounts some of its cost as its corporate social responsibility. We have some contribution from the person who's taking treatment, and we have some contribution, very importantly, coming from a donor who feels that they would like to do something for these children. And so it's a great pleasure, therefore, to say that our initial two donors, the Deepa Krishnan family and the family of Mr. V. Srinivasan, who's here, have already contributed for the first 200 people who will benefit from this program this year. And we are looking to raise money for the other 300. Tamil la solluvanga sooriyangudimi summa aadadunu. So I have to say that we're looking for people to help us. And we have outside, I know it's very crowded. It's nice to have standing room only, but it's sometimes not nice to have standing room. We have outside a set of paintings, which are 7 out of 28 paintings made by children with developmental disability in the Spastic Society of Tamil Nadu. I'd like you to look at the sample of paintings out there. I'm sure you'd love to hang them on your walls. They cost 7,500 each, but that money will go towards the treatment of one child. So if you'd like to take away a painting from us and go hang it on your wall and simultaneously contribute to the care of one child, please do feel free to do this. This is something that we feel it'll adorn your house, it'll make you feel happy every time you look at it, and at the same time, it is going to help somebody else. And we hope that we'll have new ways of enticing people to support our program as we go forward. It's a great pleasure to welcome all of you here, and I think that I will stop here, and I'm going to let other people do the speaking. Thank you so much.
Journey has been inspired by people of wisdom and integrity. We would like to pay our respects to them by presenting them with the traditional Ponnadai. From the medical fraternity, Dr. Krishnamurthy Srinivasan and Dr. S.K. Rajan, we request Dr. Rema Raghu, our clinical director, to do the honors. From the lay intelligentsia, Mr. Srinivas Acharya and Mrs. Savitri Vaiti, Mr. V. Srinivasan, we request Mr. Raghu Venkatnarayanan, our co-founder and director, to do the honors. To our president of the function, Mr. P. Murari, we request our co-founder and director, Mrs. Gayatri Krishnamurthy, to do the honors. Our eminent Neurokrish orator for 2013, Dr. Krish French, we request our founder, director, Dr. E.S. Krishnamurthy, to do the honors.
Krish and Chris, pun intended.
The lamp signifies knowledge, wisdom, and enlightenment, the very purpose of the work we aspire to do. We would like to begin by inviting our distinguished guests to join us in a small lamp lighting ceremony signifying our integration of the natural elements, earth, water, plants, and fire, heat, in our treatment programs. Today's lamplight. Project Sambboati. The docket presented to you has details of both programs, and we request you to study these at your leisure. Suffice to say that these programs will bridge modern healthcare with ancient wisdom, corporate efficiency with humanistic equity, providing a link between the mind, body, and soul, helping those affected by debilitating conditions regain their quality of life. Thank you. May we request Mr. P. Murari, a renowned administrator, former Health Secretary, Tamil Nadu, former advisor to the President of India, and advisor FICCI, to declare open Growing Brains Lab and Sambboati and deliver his presidential address.
Dr. Krish French, Dr. E.S. Krishnamurthy, whom I very fondly call Mahesh, Dr. Krishna Srinivas and Mrs. Srinivas, distinguished savants, doctors in the audience, my former colleagues in the service, ladies and gentlemen. I must say that I really miss my very dear friend and former colleague, the ex-governor of West Bengal, Mr. Gopal Krishna Gandhi, who due to his some problems was unable to come and be present here. One of the things I really looked forward to was that he would speak, and that would absolve me of the necessity to speak here, because the invitation said that the address would be either by Mr. Gopal Gandhi or the President. And I was really looking forward to basking in the glory of the speeches, and especially particularly to listen to Dr. Krish French, because for me, it would be virtually a learning curve. Be that as it may, I can only quote the memorable song of one of the Holy Trinity of Carnatic music, Saint Tyagaraja in his Pancharatna Kirtana, when he said, Entaro Manubhavudu Antariki Vandanam. So in front of all this wonderful galaxy of talent, doctors and others, all that I can quote is to echo Saint Tyagaraja's words and say, Antariki Vandanam. I am delighted for more ways than one to be present here to participate in this most evocative and wonderful function, not the least because it is something close to my own heart, and not due to my earlier stint in an earlier avatar as Secretary Health, but the continuing and abiding interest I'm having as Vice Chairman of the Socio-Economic Development Foundation of FICCI in looking after many of the corporate social responsibility functions enjoined on corporates, especially in the field of health, and particularly in the field of mental health care. And when Dr. E.S. Krishnamurti, whom I admire quite a lot, mentioned that we would have a function like that and he would like me to come and be there, I must say that I had, with a certain amount of trepidation, wondering whether I was the fittest person to come. But when I saw the wonderful work he's turning out, especially in the twin programs which he's saying about the growing brains, LAB, and his attitude and the Samodhyati which he has set up, I thought that it was wonderful if I also take part in it, because it is something which I had assured him that as far as FICCI is concerned, we will support through our corporate social responsibility organization whatever he intends to do to further the objectives of this program. And therefore, I would like to commit on behalf of FICCI and my own organizations that this would be something which would be a labor of love and great pleasure, and it would be something which would subserve the ideals of what Dr. E.S. Krishnamurti has set up and is taking forward. As far as I'm concerned, I am aware of the problems and the travails of parents who have children who are mentally challenged and otherwise differentially abled. In my own family, my youngest brother, we are a sibling, 6 people, I'm the eldest sibling, and my youngest brother has a child who is mentally challenged. And I was listening avidly in the previous session when Dr. Krishnamurti was responding to a question about special schools and others, and we tried several times to put him into a regular school, but again, this cruelty among children to set them apart and to tease them led to a deleterious effect on the already mentally challenged child, and we tried to put him into special classes, and of course it's an ongoing process and we are still having major problems, but all of us are aware of it and provide what we call TLC, tender loving care, because unless you do that and you have care, compassion and concern for these people, you'll really not be able to get over the hump. And therefore I think this 2 twin projects he has for children up to a certain age and then beyond that is something which is commendable, and we need every one of us to provide that support which is urgently needed to take this forward and to see that more and more people are embraced within that group. I know that many of them, we are not aware of the problems of children. I know many of them who suffer from dyslexia or autism. Parents don't realize that until it is too late. It was brought home to me, even though I had read about dyslexia, it was brought home to me in a poignant fashion when I saw, all of you must have seen that movie, Tare Zameen Par of Amir Khan. And that was the first time we realized what a child goes through, the trauma the child goes through, because in the initial stages of disbelieving and uncaring parents, and how a teacher through care and compassion was able to convert it and make the child really realize its true potential. And I think this is the work which Dr. Krishnamurti is doing. Similarly, about autism also, long years back I saw a movie with Dustin Hoffman, as an autistic person, and it brought home to me the problems of children who are really very well otherwise endowed and who really want to do their best but are not allowed to blossom and bring forth their innate inabilities and talent because of an uncaring and non-understanding environment. And I think this is something which we need to look at, and it's very, very important that we pursue this and see that we provide that climate conducive for those people to be really citizens of society. I read with tremendous interest an article which Dr. Krishnamurti had written long time back about the right side of the brain and the left side of the brain. And he gave the example of his two dogs. One dog which operated on the right side of the brain and the other the left side. The right side dog, very perfect, well behaved. The left side brain dog, gambolling, really not amenable to discipline and all that, and right side and left side. And I read later on an article how people on the right side are those people who are not creative, but are very well adjusted, and they study subjects like economics, accountancy, and all that. Whereas the left side brain people are creative, and they look into arts, media, and all that sort of thing. So when I read that, I thought, I must be somebody governed by the right side, because I'm not creative at all. And I said that since I studied economics and went into a state profession like bureaucracy, I must be the one who is governed by the right side. Anyway, be that as it may, one of the problems which that article articulated was the uncaring and the problems of parents who push their children into doing what they feel should be right and not thinking of what the child wants. This is the problem. I was appalled. This has happened, it didn't happen in my time, but I was appalled to see that children who even before they complete their +2, that is 12th standard, +2, are pushed by their parents to do JEE, CAT, and before they complete their +2 examinations, they have to do JEE, CAT, and all that, so that they get into engineering, MBA, and then into some good profession. That the child may like to do other things, like media, films, fine arts, nobody bothers. And this is where there is a big hiatus and a disparity between what the child wants and what the parents desire their child to have. And every morning, I am really nervous about opening the newspaper because I see suicides galore. And all these suicides of young people because they are not done well in their examination or their parents have scolded them for not doing well. And I think this is a very, very tragic thing. And I think this means that Dr. Krishnamurti's institution must, simultaneously looking after these children, must also counsel parents, saying don't push. It may be that the child is left-brained and not right-brained, and therefore you'll have to look at that in a holistic view and to see that the child achieves its fullest potential instead of being pushed, forced, and rather than cajoled into doing that. And I think that is something which is very, very critical and very, very important, and we need to do that as quickly as possible. Sometimes I wonder. In fact, Dr. Krishna's subject is the brain, mind, and the other things. I sometimes wonder whether the brain and mind are in sync. I was just telling him that when I was in the United States this time, I read a very interesting article by one David Brooks in the New York Times, where he has a contrarian view, where he says that the brain, please don't misunderstand, and the neurosciences may be wrong, don't confuse the brain with the mind. And he has quoted several books to that effect. I'm going to give that article to Dr. E.S. Krishnamurti to look and then comment upon. So this is a contrarian view. There is a lot of discussions on that because sometimes I think what distinguishes a great scientist and a brilliant mind like Einstein, who incidentally I read somewhere suffered from dyslexia, and somebody who is a serial killer or a psychopath. What happens in the brain? What else can justify a 17-year-old boy picking up guns and going into a kindergarten school in the United States and spraying bullets and killing several little children? the newspapers always say something in his brain snapped. What did really happen? Why this change? And why this different thing between somebody who is a great savant and somebody who is a killer, who without rhyme or reason suddenly decides to kill people? What happens to the brain? These are some things which we need to cogitate and think. And I think as a part of our evolution, part of our learning curve, I think we should look into this and try to provide some solutions, some counseling, some look into it so that for future things will improve. Let me conclude by saying once again how delighted I am to be here today. For me, it's a great honor and privilege to be here today to work and to assure Dr. V.S. Krishnamurthy that we in FICCI would provide all support through our corporate social responsibility wing to see that his dream becomes a reality. Having said that, I must say that I also am interested, apart from the children who need, special children who need care, I'm also a little concerned. Not because I'm touching 80, but because I feel that the demographic divide in this country will be in the next 2020, nearly 22% of our population will be over the age of 65. And therefore, that particular segment will have all the problems of geriatrics and old age problems like dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease and all that. And therefore, concomitantly with looking after these children who really deserve our support because they are the future, we also have to think in terms of some mechanism to look after those aged and dementia. Dr. Krishnamurthy, in the earlier session, talked about Ayurveda, yoga, and others. Perhaps for these ailments, of course, once you get Alzheimer's with a plaque formation, there is no cure. But pre-prevention, I read somewhere that turmeric is a very, very effective medicine to prevent dementia. But be that as it may, I do not know anything. I'm not a doctor or a scientist, but perhaps certain these things like Ayurveda, alternate systems of medicine, concomitantly with allopathic medicine, can think in terms of working effectively with both sections of the population. The young, whom Dr. Krishnamurthy is now taking care of, and the old, which I think need also our sustenance so that care, compassion, and concern will also be part and parcel of that. With these few words, let me once again congratulate Dr. Krishnamurthy and his colleagues and all of you who are present here for supporting this cause, and also with an assurance that as far as FICCI is concerned, it will work shoulder to shoulder with Dr. E.S. Krishnamurthy. More power to Dr. Krishnamurthy's elbow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your insightful address peppered with anecdotes. With the inauguration of Growing Brains Lab and Sambboati, TriMed is delighted to also announce the inauguration of its 4th center on Velachery Main Road. Dr. Chris French will be inaugurating this center tomorrow at 5 p.m. in a simple function. We have great pleasure in welcoming you all to visit and see our state-of-the-art integrative health facility. I regret to inform you that Mr. Gopal Krishna Gandhi will not be joining us today as he is unwell. May we now request Dr. P. Murari to present Dr. Krish French, Department of Neurology, University of Melbourne, Australia, the Neurokrish Lecture Award for 2013.
Just in a very lighter vein, well, I'm not a doctor, but I'm just an ordinary civil servant. But I recalled a very interesting anecdote. When I was health secretary, my boss was the late Mr. R.V. Subramaniam. And once he told me, Murari, I'll accept anything relating to health matters and health administration from you blindly, except a prescription.
Deliver the Neurokrish Lecture 2013.
Well, without further ado, I'll commence. Now, first I'd like to greet Mr. Murari, honoured guest, Dr. Krishnamurthy, honoured guests, colleagues, and ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much indeed for inviting me to give this lecture today. I'm extremely honoured. I mean, it's not just a turn of phrase. I didn't know exactly what I was coming into when Krish asked me, and the topic itself is somewhat difficult, but coming here today to see the amazing work that's being done and the audience before me, I hope that I can discharge this reasonably well. I do have to say a few things just at the very beginning about this topic. It's obviously a large topic, it's a difficult topic, and so I reflected as I was coming here, I mentioned to a few of my colleagues that I was going to talk on this, and they said, well, that should be a very short talk. One of the answers is, how does the brain work? And the answer is, we don't know. But I can't leave you with that. What I do want to leave you with, I hope, is a balance between the immense advances in neuroscience, which I will try to overview in a fairly broad and short fashion. And then I would like to address some of the more substantial issues, I think, to do with this, the nature of, that are becoming very important topically, and even becoming topics of public interest and significance. That is higher cortical function and how it affects our very nature as human beings and our understanding as human beings. So what I want, just a bit of an overview of the talk. I will take a historical approach. I'll try to tell a story, because I think that in neuroscience, in any human endeavour, but the history behind it is so critical. And the history of neuroscience over the last, let's say, 100 or 200 years is amazing, but it does stretch back even further than that. So I will tell a selective story, though. I cannot tell everything. I will try to inform you about what we do know, but I will also try to inform you, which I think is, as I was going to say, as I said before, actually a very important point as well. I will tell you a bit about the structure of the brain, and then I will go on to more complex questions about memory, motivation, psychopathology. And then I will address some ways forward, how we can improve upon the already amazing developments in neuroscience that have occurred over this last, especially towards the end of the last century and in this current century. One of the overarching themes that I will try to convey to you is the need for a so-called systems approach. It's no longer sufficient to look at the biochemistry of a system or the electrophysiology of a system or the computational aspect of a system, but we must work in an integrated fashion. I think that will come through more and more as I talk today. You can hear, okay. And then finally, I will address some of the, as I mentioned before, some of the larger questions. Can we ever really answer things about the nature of the human mind? So I thought, just in case you don't get anything else out of this lecture, I should just present a very simple picture of the human brain as in a very simplistic fashion for some of the people in this audience. As you can see, that there's a large cortex and there's the brainstem, which subserves a lot of so-called vegetative functions such as breathing, cardiovascular function, etc. Cerebellum here controls movement, but also is increasingly known to affect how we process information cognitively. Then the basal ganglia, again, is an area that's been known for decades, or perhaps even over a century, as being an important area in terms of movement. But it's becoming increasingly apparent that there's a very important set of nuclei with regard to motivation and so forth, and human behaviour. Then in the cortices themselves, we can see the temporal lobes, the frontal lobes, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, mainly for visual activity. Temporal lobe has very complex functions and is often a site of epilepsy, as Krish was saying previously. Frontal lobe, often we talk about frontal lobe syndromes and people having disinhibition and so forth, but I think it's really instructive just to look at this very simple diagram. You see that frontal lobe is really, really big, and it subserves many different functions which we really do not have a great deal of information about. And I won't dwell further on the gross neuroanatomy. So I think this analogy is part of my talk, again, is a key theme, that as we're looking what is a very, very complex problem which is beyond our scientific capabilities of fully understanding at the moment, we as scientists and we as people who are interested in understanding this problem We must be humble about it and see we are blinded. We do not have the tools at the moment to fully understand the system. So we really are like the folk of story lore, the blind men looking at the elephant. There's something before us. We all have a different perspective. We must all combine our stories so that we can get a better understanding. And not only that, we must also understand that we are blinded. We do not have the answers at the moment. That's one of the things I want to convey. I do want to convey, I'll try to convey to you some of the amazing advances that have occurred, but indeed we are still far from really having the tools to answer definitively a lot of these issues. So I thought I'd just give you some history, an overview, as I have seen it. It's a very selective history. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, had a lot to say about neuroscience, surprisingly. He identified the brain as being the site of epilepsy, for example, and made many other incredibly apposite and interesting and insightful observations about neural function. Then I've brought up this fellow Lucretius. You may not actually have heard of him, but he wrote a very influential book named De Rerum Natura, which is based on Epicurean philosophy, but is enormously influential over the centuries. And essentially he incorporated the atomism of Democritus and with Epicurean philosophy to give it what was really would be considered an incredibly prescient view of how the whole world works, including the human mind. And he believed it was simply a function of atoms and interactions with atoms. And it's actually very similar to many of the modern theories that we have, but I would say it is lacking. Then we come to Descartes. We shoot ahead 1600 years or thereabouts, or even more. And he made a great breakthrough in the sense that he developed basically an idea of physiology. How do things work? How do things that previously we couldn't have any idea about in the human mind or in terms of how the brain works? He started developing all sorts of mechanistic ideas, some of which were brilliant and some of which were completely wrong. In addition to that, of course, he developed the Cartesian philosophy, which has been an enormous influence over the years. But the primary thing he has ended up doing is that he's basically separated the human psyche into a material part and then what he considered a spiritual part. And that is with us today. That particular view is extremely interesting and extremely influential, but probably again a little inadequate. He also, for the mathematicians amongst you, developed the Cartesian plane, so all your Cartesian geometry is due to him. And then I wanted to come a little bit further ahead, and these are gentlemen who are not so well known to the public, but in particular John Eccles is an Australian he died some years ago, but he was a Nobel Prize winner and got the Nobel Prize for neuroscience, or for medicine actually, in I think 1963. And for synaptic transmission. And Sherrington was his mentor, and he got the Nobel Prize, I think, when he was about 70. And he was at Oxford, and he mentored Eccles, and together they've had an enormous influence on neuroscience, and both of them were very thoughtful men about the nature of cognition, about the nature of human knowledge, and how it related to neuroscience. And although they lived many years ago, their influence, their particular view on things, I think is still worth very much thinking about. Karl Popper was a very well-known philosopher of science who worked with Eccles on some of these topics. So that's a little bit of history that I'd like to just share with you. I just put up this frontispiece of one of the works of Sherrington, the integrative action of the nervous system. I don't actually remember the year it was published. It's probably got it on the frontispiece there. It's probably in the 20s, I think. But again, an enormously influential work in the sense that instead of just thinking about how does a muscle twitch or how does a nerve conduct electricity, he tried to put together how does the nervous system actually compute, or how does it integrate together to form these complex functions. It was an amazing book which has influenced scores of scientists subsequently and has had an enormous effect on neuroscience over the years. So now let's go forward. What I'd like to do now is just talk about some very basic ideas about the brain and neuroscience. So one of the major players was at the end of the 19th century, Ramon y Cajal in Spain. Now at that stage he had done some amazing histology, so in other words looking at the brain, seeing that it was made up of cells. And at that stage, there was two schools of thought. One was that the brain was a net that just was continuously interconnected. And the other was that there were neurons that actually were individual units of functional activity in the brain. And he by means of his brilliant scientific work, his brilliant histology, essentially proved this doctrine. Interestingly enough, to be completely truthful, at this point in time we are beginning to see some aspects of the central nervous system that look as though they are actually directly interconnected. But that's another, as always in science, the wheel always turns round, but that's another story. So neurons are the functional units of the brain. They are immensely complex. One thing I would like to point out that I think is insufficiently addressed by my colleagues is, and this is what probably my main area of work is on single neurons, how they work and how they integrate information, how they fire. And I would say, to the best of my knowledge, we cannot actually describe how a single neuron works exhaustively. I could stun you, I could bore you or stun you or whatever with equations and the molecular biology of these individual neurons, the neurotransmitters. I could do that. But I would have to tell you, we still do not know how they work. We cannot give you a set of equations, a model that will imitate a single neuron. So if we think that we can explain the whole system in terms of neurons, we still have a very long way to go. And just by the by, I put this up because they look so nice, actually. The structures are beautiful. And when I look down my microscope and I see those neurons with their axons and their dendrites sitting at the bottom of that dish, it's really good. And they look great, especially if you put these special stains on. They show up really nice colours. We have much nicer colour these days, by the way. One thing I will also say that there are 100 billion neurons in the brain. And in addition to that, there are more supportive cells, the glia. And while we have a fair idea what the neurons are doing, the glia, we really still don't know too much. So that's, again, to inform you of where we're at as far as information about the nervous system goes. Now, so what I've dealt with here is the fundamental basis of the nervous system, an individual neuron. Now, what I wanted to talk about now is how do these neurons connect together? So there are different ways that could be. We could have something like an MP3 player, you plug it into a computer or your speakers or something like that. There could be a wire or an electrical connection between each cell. Or there could be something else. And this was a very unexpected issue, I mean, that they would communicate the way they do. And in fact, as this diagram attempts to show you, oops, let's go backwards, an individual neuron connects with another neuron via an axon, and then it forms what's called a synapse. And the synapse allows chemicals to go across a very small space, which is of the order of nanometers. And they diffuse across and then activate the postsynaptic cell that they're trying to activate. Now, the people who discovered this were Eccles, and Sherrington in particular. Or Eccles got the Nobel Prize for this, and then Katz and Hubbard also did a lot of work in this area. And this is just, again, to show you at slightly higher magnification. That's the presynaptic neuron, the one that's connecting to the neuron, and it's secreting substances across to the postsynaptic cell and activating it. And there are many, many different types of synapse in the brain, of which, again, the detailed electrophysiology of the synapse is still not well understood. And as we work on it more and more, the intracellular molecular machinery associated with synaptic transmission is absolutely extraordinary. It's so complex. So what I've done so far is I've told you about neurons, and then I've told you about how they connect together. At least approximately. The next stage in history, as I see it anyway, is in 1952, Hodgkin and Huxley did their absolutely remarkable set of experiments for which they got the Nobel Prize with it in the same year as Eccles in '63. And they worked out how it is that a nerve cell is electrically excitable. And until then, there were a lot of good ideas around, but they, in a single set of 4 papers in 1952, changed the field by, let's say, 3 or 4 orders of magnitude in terms of the detail with which we could understand how neurons worked. And so these are the 2 gentlemen, Hodgkin and Huxley. They were working in England at the time. This is a squid, And the reason I've got that up is because the way they managed to do this was to take this large squid out of this, large nerve fibre out, which is called the giant axon, as you might imagine. It's about 1 millimetre in diameter, so you can get your electrodes into it. I actually, last year, I visited one of the great men of electrophysiology and actually sat in on a squid experiment. We don't do it very much anymore because there's not many squid around, and we have other ways to do it. This diagram down here, on the lower left, is a picture of the electrical activity in a nerve. So that's about a 100 millivolt swing of potential, and it's about 1 millisecond long. Now that's in a squid axon. Now the strange thing is that just about every other neuron in the central nervous system looks like that. Not exactly the same, there are quite a few variations, but really 1 millisecond long with an after potential. They activate about the same potential. So it was an extraordinary discovery. But then what they did, they went on to then be able to explain the cell in terms of a very simple electrical model, which I've shown here. Don't worry about the details, but essentially it's a capacitor and a few resistors and some conductances, and that's it. And then I've been warned on many occasions, never show an equation. And Terry O'Brien, the head of my unit, just will sort of, he doesn't give me a hard time about many things, but if I show an equation, he gets upset. But anyway, today, I'm just going to quickly show you something. This. Now, this looks complicated, okay, but it isn't. That's high school calculus. And the reason I put it up is because in that set of equations, first order differential equations, that's how a nerve works electrically. It's all there. There are more subtleties to it, but that's it. So in that set of equations, they told you how a neuron worked, basically. It was an amazing achievement. And the reason I put it up as well is to show you where neuroscience made that big step in going from an observational type of activity in many ways through to a biophysical activity where we could actually use the very basic techniques of physics and electrochemistry and dynamics. There's another thing I did want to say, if I may just digress very briefly, that these equations also, it isn't really I think appreciated enough, but you may have heard of the term nonlinear dynamics. It was a very popular sort of popular science topic probably 10 or 15 years ago. In other words, how do systems oscillate? How do systems go into chaotic regimes? And these equations actually are some of the first examples of practical nonlinear dynamics in a practical application. And they apply to things, strangely enough, things like cardiac arrhythmias will be driven by abnormalities of these equations, and epilepsy to some extent is almost certainly due to behaviour of these equations. So a brief pause, where are we up to? So far we've seen that